Before we begin today's video, I'd like to shout out to one of our newest subscribers, Kai Carroll. Thank you for subscribing, and welcome to the family. And now on with today's video. Ooh, look at what I found! Digimon Digital Adventures. Oh, I just love Digimon. One of my favorite series was, of course, going to be Digimon Frontier, followed by the Tamers, which was an excellent series and had a good gimmick to it, having the card slice. And I am looking forward to being able to watch Digimon Ghost Game. I've seen some clips, and they look excellent. I especially love the slight change of pace they were going with the series, at least from the clips I can see. Some of the clips did make me a little uncomfortable, but from what I can tell, this is definitely a good series of Digimon compared to less satisfactory seasons. But anyway, Digimon Digital Adventures. I'm just going to call this DDA for simplicity, but DDA is a non-profit Digimon TTRPG that you can find here on the internet. The PDF is a somewhat small. It is a D6 system, so you're not using too many dice, you're just using what you can get on hand. So it is definitely a slightly easier RPG system to use. But I think we're going to start this series off by seeing how we can create a human character. And they do have some example characters compared to Pokemon Tabletop United, another non-profit RPG system. So we're going to go ahead and use one of the example characters that we have available to us to explain how exactly you yourself can create your own tamer, or digital champion. So, to start things off with the human character creation guide, we're going to be using... I'm going to get this name extremely wrong. I did look it up when I first started this PDF file, but I totally forgot how to pronounce it. Keru. I'm going to say Keru. Keoru? Keoru sounds better. Anyway, here is our character, Keoru. We have a male of age 13. And the stats are definitely pretty interesting. We only have 5 attributes, as they are called, and we'll get into that shortly. But we have our partner Digimon, which we'll most likely be talking about in the next video. And we got some interesting stuff here. So, to start things off, we are an age 13, which puts us, according to the age category, in the enhanced template. This is basically our challenge rating system. This is how strong we are, how strong our opponents are going to be. And our starting CP, which is the points that we are going to be using to distribute among our attributes and skills, is a total of 40. As we can see with Garu, I know I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. Somebody please correct me in the comments. But anyway, I want to say his name is Kai for short. For Kai, we have his stats, and this is supposed to add up to 40. Now, strangely, it isn't. It's only 39. I think there was a typo, because according to the system, we can also have some other points distributed elsewhere. But if you saw those stats, you saw that the maximum was 5 points. And that is our cap. We can only have one stat as a maximum stat of 5. Everything else has to be at least 1 point below this maximum point. So everything else that you saw there was below a 5. And I think that is genius. It keeps people from trying to min-max, or to try to be a special little snowflake. A Mary Sue, if you will. So that is definitely interesting. Having this cap of 5 for one stat in this experience category. And of course, your other skills and attributes are going to be 1 point below the maximum at the very least. And you can see here at the bottom that we get to put some more points into something called Torments, which we'll get into here in a moment. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about these attributes and skills. Our attributes are agility, body, charisma, intelligence, and willpower. And each attribute has its own skill. So what are these? So for agility, we have a measure of the human's manual dexterity and general reflexes. Agility covers throwing things, jumping out of the way of monsters or moving objects, and your overall coordination. So something I would probably be bad at. Next is your agility skills. You have dodge, which is your defensive skill used when the tamer needs to avoid being hit. So instead of your armor class just stopping the attack like in Dungeons and Dragons, you have this dodge ability. Next is fight, an offensive skill used when the human is trying to hit something. We'll probably get more into dodge and fight when we cover combat, but moving on is stealth. Used when the character has to hide or avoid detection. Seems fair. Next is body, the sum of the tamer's strength and constitution. Interesting, putting both of those into one ability type. Definitely a lot simpler than Dungeons and Dragons setup. Alright, anyway, body is often used with skills that govern your endurance and physical power. Body is essentially how good of physical shape the tamer is in. Another thing I'd probably be bad at. For your skills, you have athletics, used for acts like climbing, jumping, and swimming. Your endurance, used when testing the character's ability to go without, usually without food, water, or shelter, for an extended period or other physical stresses. So that's definitely interesting. And finally, you have your feats of strength, used for lifting, pulling, pushing, and so on. Next is your charisma. Charisma is a character's force of will and persuasiveness. Charismatic characters will be more likable or just know what makes people tick. So very similar to Dungeons and Dragons charisma, where you know how to talk to people or you know body language. For your charisma skills, you have manipulate, used to manipulate other characters via lying, misdirection, or intimidation. Interesting, so your deception and intimidation are put into the same skill. Definitely makes things easier there. Perform, used for singing, dancing, using a musical instrument, drawing, etc. And then persuasion, a gauge of how convincing the character is. So this will probably be sort of both in persuasion and in misdirection. Next is intelligence. Plainly put, how smart the character is or how knowledgeable they are. A well-read bookworm type of character or one who sports an extensive amount of technical knowledge will get a lot of use out of intelligence. For your skills, you have computer, used for skill checks directly involving computers and other associated bits of technology. Survival, how good a character is at making it on their own, cooking included. So that's definitely useful. Knowledge, a general skill used for book smarts and their ability to memorize. And our final attribute is willpower. Lastly, willpower is the human character's overall sense of self and their focus. Characters with high willpower will not back down unless they decide for themselves. Willpower is also linked to how well the character is able to perceive the world. For your skills in willpower, you have perception, the ability to sense what's around your character, whether by direct sight or, in some cases, common sense. Decipher intent. So your perception. Used to figure out what's going on, whether it's how a tool works, or what something or someone is actually up to or trying to say. So that's pretty good. Very useful. And finally, bravery, used when a character needs to face their fears, overcome terrifying scenarios, or face overwhelming odds. Now, as you can see here, we have another set of, attributes. This is these are formulas for another set of skills known as derived stats. Dependent on how a character is built, the derived stats will differ. Sometimes a human might find themselves under attack or in the heat of combat, and this is what these stats are for. So your wound box, is your hit points. You have your body stat plus your endurance stat. You have your speed, which is agility plus survival. This is how many spaces you may move with a move action. Next is accuracy pool, your agility plus your fight stat. Your dodge pool, your agility plus dodge stat. Strange, you got the dodge skill and then the dodge pool. Maybe the dodge pool is how many times you can dodge before you get tired? That's something I have to look into later when we get into combat, since this is mostly combat-related things. Next is your armor formula, which is body plus endurance. I guess that is going to decrease the amount of damage your tamer would take. Who knows? Next is damage, body plus fight. I guess this is how much of a punch you can pack behind your fist. Accuracy, dodge, armor, and damage will be talked more about in the combat section, as it says here. Alright, so moving on to aspects. This one's definitely a bit weird. Aspects are more of your roleplay sort of statistics. It helps you play your character better. It's sort of the RP statistics, as you can see. Every human character that is introduced to the game has something unique that makes them different or stand out from their peers. Beyond the stat lines and special orders that human characters have access to, another thing that's very important to consider about character creation is the notion of aspects. Aspects are, in essence, core parts about your character, which may be helpful or detrimental to them depending on various types of situations. A character at creation has both a major aspect and a minor aspect. Your major aspect is something prominent about a character's personality. It could be indicative of something that the character is good at, or a trait that is prevalent in how they choose to approach some situations. So for our example here, rocking and rolling, Despite being the youngest, Kai is strong, and he prides himself at that. However, he knows full well he can be lacking in the technology and talking department. It greatly upsets him if he's deliberately presented with a situation that capitalizes on that. Interesting. We'll get more into that here in a second. On the same line of thought, a minor aspect is something more subtle about the character's personality that might not be as rapidly recognizable as a major aspect. For Kai's example, we have a friend in me. As someone who's always hanging out with his friends one way or another, Kai is always keeping tabs on his friends and is keenly aware of their emotional states. If something is wrong with them, he finds himself worrying more about them than the things around him. Interesting. So, this clearly has something to do with your attributes and checks. Okay, so further reading, when an aspect becomes relevant to a role, you get to modify the role further. So yes, it is in fact a check of some kind. Characters may trigger their major aspect once a narrative day/session. Minor aspects may be triggered twice. So this is outside of combat. This is a non-combat sort of bonus to your checks. If you apply your negative modifier to an applicable situation, you are allowed to regain the use of your major or minor aspects positive once per narrative day. So that is definitely useful. So if you roleplay the negatives of your character's aspect, you will again be able to use the positives. That is very interesting of a roleplay strategy. Definitely makes roleplaying a lot easier. So let's go ahead and take a look at see what exactly this means here. If we go ahead and take a look at Kai's stats, his major aspect, rocking and rolling, mentions that he is strong. So anything that would go into your feats of strength skill, you would get a +4 to that roll. Maybe even to endurance. Or possibly even when you're fighting, I don't know. However, he knows full well he can be lacking in a technology and talking department. So your computer skills and your charisma are going to be a little bit lower. You are going to be less likely of succeeding a check that involves your computer and charisma skills. It greatly upsets him when he is deliberately presented with a situation that capitalizes on that. So that could be also a detriment to your performance or even your willpower. At least that's what it looks like. Next is your minor aspect, which is going to give you a positive to your decipher intent. You know what's going on with your friends. You know their emotional state. However, if something is wrong with them, you are going to worry about their emotional state more than you're going to worry about what's going on immediately around you, which of course is your perception. So this definitely makes character interactions a lot more interesting. And honestly, if you're worrying about your friends more, you might even have a penalty to your dodge check while you are in combat. So some of these can be applied in combat as well as out of combat. It definitely depends on the character. Again, this is a very interesting concept, way to make your roleplay a bit more interactive. I personally like this. Moving on to Torment. Torment, things which one player sees as a minor torment for their character might be a major torment for another character. Some things might affect a character more despite being the same thing. For example, one character could have a fear of the ocean and dislike of water, but another could have an absolutely crippling fear of the oceans, which doesn't let them enjoy them, even enjoy the time at the beach. What matters is the intensity of the torment, but be careful, the GM should still have the final say in what can and cannot count as a major or minor torment. So this is something that you're going to have to work with your GM on. But this is sort of your fears. What causes you to not be that great of a character? What holds you back? For Kai, he pretends he's stupid more often than not. He's willing to let things pass and play the fool if it's worth having a laugh over, but deep down, there are things even he won't stand for, and he hates being treated like he doesn't know any better. So that's definitely an interesting characteristic for him. Then you have your fight or flight. Deep down, as much as he wants to be the hero that he idolizes, he's painfully aware that there's more to being a hero than just being strong. Those shows he idolizes, he's their epitome. He's just as fake as they are. When presented with what seems like an unwinnable situation that he can't just brute force, he will become scared. Definitely an interesting character flaw. He will present himself as the strong type when it becomes necessary. But if that strength of his that he idolizes so much cannot win him the fight, he is kind of useless, and he knows it. That's what we talked about in the aspects. If he can't brute force something, he can't do it at all. It is one of his weaknesses, and this definitely goes with those aspects. Continuing on, as you progress through the game, you may gain chances to mark your torment boxes off. Marking off a torment box signifies a character working towards overcoming their fear. We actually see this in the original anime, and even subsequent series, where the characters work on themselves as people and not just as tamers. Trying to save the world's one thing, but if you don't improve yourself, you're not going to be able to do anything else. So this definitely is significant of the torment. When a character is confronted with their torment, whether it be from memory as the group sits around the campfire, recollecting, directly seeing their torment, or otherwise, the character rolls 3d6 plus willpower. Then subtracts the number of unmarked torment boxes to the appropriate torment from the roll result. The goal is to hit the target number, detailed later, of 12. If a character succeeds in the roll, they make progress to resolve their torment and may mark off another torment box. Interesting. I kind of like this concept as well. A failure results in the character becoming sullen and withdrawn, and if this happens in combat, they may not be of any help at all, being locked down by their fears. It's interesting. Very interesting. I kind of like this concept already, and we haven't even gotten into anything else. A result of 5 or lower is considered a critical failure, meaning that the character is affected so greatly by the torment that they may lash out, hide, or even abandon the group for a time. Oh, that is awesome roleplay right there. We have definitely seen this in the different Digimon anime. Oh, that is lovely. I love this. This definitely works with the roleplay aspect of this game. This is more than just combat. This is definitely a roleplay heavy game. Not that type of roleplay, but a interactive sort of roleplay. This is more than just combat, and it is fascinating. Your character interactions are more prominent in this game than with other TTRPGs I have seen. Finally, a result of 0 or less. Remember, we do have some negative modifiers with our aspects. A result of 0 or less will reduce your character to a blubbering mess, quite possibly at the worst time, and have a pretty fair chance of abandoning the group, leading the others to follow after them, or in the worst case scenario, triggering a dark evolution. Ooh. So if you get a 0, you could cause a dark Digivolve. I like that! A reason for the dark Digivolutions. When your Torment roll is a result of 0 or less. That's great. And you are subtracting the number of unmarked boxes. Interesting. Okay, so continuing on here. So thus, these are the main things to keep in mind about torments. A player can only activate a torment once per day on their own. After that, the GM may still choose to have a player activate a torment again. The GM may also ask the player to make a torment check at any time. Interesting. So the player can trigger their torment on their own for whatever reason. But the GM can do it at any time they want. Okay, a final thing over here is at creation. If you think your character would have made progress in their torments prior to them being played outright in the game, you may choose to mark off torment boxes by using CP for a 1-to-1 basis. 1 CP is 1 torment box marked. By the looks of it, we do not have any marks on our torment, even though we have an O with a bunch of X's. But it says 0 out of, so I don't know. I guess that means we have 2 things of torment, or maybe they're supposed to be marked. Again, I think this is some sort of misprint here. I don't know. But anyway, moving on, this helps to signify that while the characters might not be entirely over the torment, they're making headway towards getting past it, and may have been working on it for a long time. However, you cannot mark off your torment boxes at creation. Okay. These are the following progressive limits of torments at creation. 2 boxes for a minor torment, 3 for a major torment, and 4 for a terrible torment. Post-creation, you may spend experience granted to you by the GM to mark off torment boxes. The cost increases compared to how it worked at creation, similar to how attributes and skills are harder to increase post-creation. This does require GM approval. To mark off more Torment boxes post-creation, you must spend experience equal to the number of marked Torment boxes plus 1. For example, if you have 3 marked Torment boxes and wish to spend extra experience to increase the number up to 4, you would need to spend 4 experience points. Try not to view a Torment as a detriment to your character's roleplay, as it is more as a tool to show the GM and give yourself something that you want your character to overcome by the end of the game. Character growth, basically. It's okay to fail a Torment check because sometimes it may lead to interesting roleplay and you might discover something new about your character that you might not have known. Narrative is king. I love this. It is definitely an interesting aspect of this roleplay. Using the narrative to move the story along. Definitely something you do not see too much in other RPGs, like with Dungeons and Dragons. This actively has you using the narrative to move the story along, which is phenomenal. Now, before we end today's video, we do need to go into the experience, being able to proceed forward as a character. What happens at the end of a session? Experience points and human advancement. For your character advancement at the end of each session, a GM will hand out an appropriate amount of experience points and bonus DP based on several factors. At least 2 experience points and 1 bonus DP should be awarded at the end of a session to each character, whether they did anything on the list or not. Consult the following list for ideas on how to award experience and bonus DP at the end of a session. Do not consider this a full list. Think of your own ideas too. Some examples of ways you can get experience points are: for every session of combat that the character participated, add 1 experience. If a new stage is unlocked, add another 1 experience. If the character helped solve a problem and progress the story or just generally did something awesome or reward worthy, add 1 experience for every instance. If the character helped to solve a major problem in the story, add 2 experience for every instance. If the character attempted a torment, add 1 experience for every instance. As mentioned before, this list isn't an end-all so much as it's a guideline to give GMs an idea of how to progress the game. So what can you use this experience for? Well, we get to see that in human advancement. Your characters have come a long way, and probably have gotten experience points throughout their journey. Experience may be spent on increasing a character's attributes, skills, and purchasing additional points of inspiration, which we'll get into inspiration at a later date. This is how it can be used. Increasing an attribute to the next rank will cost experience equal to the new rating doubled. For example, increasing an attribute from 2 to 3 will cost 6 experience points. I like it. Increasing a skill is the simplest process, requiring a small amount of experience to boost a more niche bonuses to the tamer. To increase the skill to the next rank, you may spend a number of experience points equal to the new rating. So, using a previous example, from 2 to 3, you're going to be paying 3 experience points. Makes sense. Increasing the 4 to 5 costs 5 experience, 1 to 2 costs 2 experience, so on and so forth. Increasing an attribute is more involved and expensive process, but it can be balanced out due to the wider range of checks attributes covers. You can also spend experience to modify an aspect. With GM permission, you can spend 3 experience to change your aspect to something more appropriate for the campaign or setting. So if you don't like your original aspect, you can spend some of your experience points to change it to something a little bit more fitting. Which is interesting. I kind of like that. Inspiration. If purchase is gained by spending 2 experience points for every point of inspiration you currently have. For example, if you have 4 points of inspiration and wish to purchase a 5th, you need to spend 8 experience points. So that will definitely sway a character to not use them on experience, on the inspiration, but use it on something more prominent. Lastly, you can ask your GM if you may spend experience to mark off Torment boxes by spending amount of experience equal to the number of currently marked boxes plus 1. For example, if you have 3 boxes, you would need to spend 4 experience to mark off an additional Torment box. Since it's been a while, let's take a look at our characters to see what it would be like if they earned 35 experience points. So Gato here has increased his agility, body, intelligence, each by 1 point. And he has marked off 4 of his Torment boxes on his Not an Idiot and on his Fight or Flight. So that's good. So that's his experience points. So that's how you would increase your character levels. And that is the end of today's video. I do apologize for some of the rambling. This is a newer system, and I wanted to make sure I had everything covered and giving my own thoughts on how these mechanics work. If you would like to see how to create your Digimon partner, stay tuned for the next video. Until then, this has been Drayhan, and I am offline.